Hey, it's Paul here on The Friendly Reviewer. On this channel we do a ton of tech reviews, so make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can watch more videos just like this one. I recently picked up the Ronin-S to go along with my Canon 80D, which I'm shooting with right here. And I know it's not listed as compatible, and we'll get to some of that and those details later, but I couldn't think of a better place to test it out than the City Museum in St. Louis, Missouri, where we can climb and crawl and chase my kids around, just all sorts of motion and cool things to look at. I want to thank the City Museum for giving me permission to film there. If you've never checked them out before, you can find a link to them in the description below, as well as a link to all the gear that I use in this video. Now let's check it out. The first thing I want to get to is crawling around with this in tight places, because this thing is so much smaller than the other Ronins that are out there. I went down nearly every slide at the City Museum, which is a really tight place, and most people would be a little nervous taking a DSLR down it, let alone a whole stabilizer system. I know the previous ones wouldn't be able to fit in there, and it did just fine. I wasn't afraid of hitting on anything. There was only one slide I skipped because it was a little difficult just for me to get into itself, but other than that, it worked just great. And just a little side note there, they have a 10-story circular slide there, and it's just awesome. There's just all sorts of really cool slides there to check out. Besides that, what was probably more challenging were the other tight places crawling around, especially the outside portion. You can see these really cool areas that we were able to go in, and a lot of this requires a lot of crawling and climbing. So I needed one free hand to do a lot of climbing, while the other one was holding on to the Ronin. This thing is a bit heavy, but it was manageable, and I was able to climb around and get some nice shots with it. That brings up the weight. This thing is fairly heavy, but it really was manageable. I carried it around for between 3 to 4 hours there straight, and I thought I'd be sore the next day, but I wasn't. From that, I was able to learn a couple tips. The first one is you can rest the bottom portion on your hip or your belt, and that takes some of the weight off if you're just standing around a little bit. The second is you can tuck the tripod grip underneath your arm near your elbow, and that gives you a bit more stability and a little bit more leverage as you walk around with it. So that worked fine, and I was able to use it that way. If you're wondering why I'm sweating, it is hot in the studio. We're getting our air conditioner replaced hopefully tomorrow, so bear with me. This tripod grip right here is a lifesaver. You can sit it down on there, you can open it up, and you can do auto tuning with it, you can do calibration with it, or use this as a gimbal, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this thing is great that they include this as standard and not optional. It has rubber grip on it that's not too sticky, but it's enough to give you a good grip. And it also attaches with a 1/4-inch screw, and there's room for a 3/8-inch screw on this other handle that I'll get to in a second. But the fit and finish is just perfect on here, and it doesn't pinch your hand either, which I've seen some others do. Moving up to the battery grip, this thing has that same rubber coating on it, has a good feel to it. It's very solid, and it has a button on the bottom that you hit, and it makes the light show up so you can see how much life you have left. This thing is crazy. It has 12 hours of battery power. That 4 hours-ish that I was out at the City Museum only ate up 30% of the battery and left 70%. So it is a true 12 hours of battery. That means you could just leave this thing on all day and you won't have any problems. I will say the one negative that I don't like about it is this light stays on for about 12 hours afterwards, and I don't like that a lot just because it can be annoying if you're in a dark situation. Perhaps there's a way to get this to turn off. I haven't figured it out. Let me know in the comments below if you know how to. It attaches to the main unit using this little lever here. It just slides on and off very easily. One of the places I also tried it was the Ferris wheel. It was really easy to get in and out, and I had no fear taking it on there. I got some really cool shots doing that, and I didn't have any fear of dropping it either. And that was a lot of fun trying it out in that scenario. Moving up to the top control portion. To turn it on, there's an on button on the side here. You just hold this on for 3 seconds, the lights go across, and it'll turn on. But it does make a sound, so be aware of that if you're at a play or at a wedding or somewhere where it's going to be distracting. That'd be something I'd like to be able to turn off using the app if that was possible. It is nice whenever you're in bright sun and it's hard to see these LEDs. To turn it off, you hold it in for 3 seconds, the LEDs count down, red, and then it turns off. Another option that will save some battery is you could just double tap it and it'll kill the motors and allow you to manually move this around and it won't hold it in place. That might be useful if you're trying to get a little bit of extra battery life or if you're going to be finagling around with your camera setup. Moving on to the next portions here, there is the M button. And this is going to allow you to select between the 3 user settings where you can customize it to your liking. For each one of them, you can change the joystick, which is going to move this around, to change what up and down and left and right means, what the deadband is in there. It's also going to be able to change how fast it moves and also the smoothness, so whenever you let off of it, how does it slowly stop or does it stop kind of in a jerky manner. And you can change that for each one. So most people, and this is how it comes by default, has 1 is kind of a slow movement, 2 is a little bit faster, and 3 is even faster. What I did is I inverted the tilt. I like pushing up and making it go down, and same thing, down goes up, and side to side I inverted that as well, but that's not as noticeable. On 3, I changed the side to side to roll so I could do infinite roll. So you can just point it away from you, do a double tap so it auto centers, and then just hold the roll button over and it's just going to spin and spin and spin and give you some cool shots. One thing to remember about that is that whenever you're doing that, you have to be level because it's going to roll relative to the ground and not relative to this. I wish there was a way to put it in a body type mode instead of relative to the ground mode, because I tried to do this up at an angle and I couldn't do it because it's really a combination of roll, tilt, and pan all at once to do that. Not a big deal, but it's something I did notice. The other thing you can do here is customize your smooth track. That's going to allow you to change how it reacts to your movements. That's going to give you those nice, cool, stable shots. Here's an example of a nice slow one as I walked around, zoomed in on this mirror mosaic pole. It looked super cool. I think this would look awesome too, zoomed in on some people with it blurry in the background. The other buttons on here, this record button, this for the Canon 80D. If you press this button, you can hook up to this RSS port right here on the side, an IR output, and that's going to trigger your camera. And so you can use this with some of the other fancier modes I'm talking about or to take pictures. It does not work, unfortunately, to start and stop record, and you also can't hit it to do autofocus or to focus the camera. Also with this lens and camera combination, the USB port doesn't work to attach into the camera, so you can't use the focus wheel. It'd be really nice if DJI made a way to do that, but currently it doesn't work. I'd rather have that direct input into the camera so I could start and stop recording and also do the focus. I still think it's worth it with the Canon 80D because of the cool shots that you can get with this. One of the cool things it also has is this trigger on the back. And if you do a triple tap, it spins around and looks at you. If you do a double tap, it looks forward, and a single hold is when it stays in follow mode, where it's going to just stay looking at wherever you're looking at. And you can see you can wave it all around like crazy, and it's just going to keep looking in the same spot. If you hold that in and bring it to a low spot, you can see that you can go in underslung mode, which is great for some low shots, and here's some where I was chasing my kids around. At the very end of this shot, I had to switch into sport mode to follow him up the half pipe. And the way to do that is by holding in this M button. So that quickly switches you into that sport mode. It's easily reachable. And this is going to follow where you're pointing at very quickly. And it's really seamless going back and forth between follow mode, standard mode, and sports mode. And I really like how they set that up there. One thing I don't like on it is the pan is infinite. You can just keep spinning it around. But the tilt and the roll have their limits to them. and I wish that they didn't. It'd be nice if every axis could spin around, so you have to be careful and be thoughtful of how you angle this to make sure that you're not having this collision occur. It wasn't too bad to figure that out, but there is a little bit of a learning curve to it. Let me go back to the controls for a minute with the app. There's some really cool things you can do with the app. The first is you can sit it down and use it as a remote unmanned camera, and you can use it to control where it's looking, so you can have it sitting off to the side and control it. Unfortunately, you can't see the video feed, but you can control it that way. And actually with the Canon 80D, if I had two different phones running at the same time, I could see that feed and run it that way, so that would be pretty cool. The other things you can do is panorama, so you can pick your overlap and your focal length and all that. It's going to give you the shots that you need to do that panorama. You can do something called a time-lapse, which everyone knows about, but that's going to use that trigger in order to work. So you have to have that connected with the IR portion or connected to your camera. You can do a motion time-lapse where you pick different points where it's going to go to, and it's going to follow that along, and you can pick how long it stops at each point, and it triggers your camera to take pictures. And you can see the results here that weren't great. And then the last one is tracking, where you can just pick these paths, how long it takes to get between them, and how long is it going to stay at each point, and it's going to follow that around. Remember, to do any of the time-lapse or the panorama ones, you need to hook up that cable on the side to trigger your camera. I want to see how repeatable the track function is. So what I did is I repeated the same scene a couple times and made some changes and see if I could splice it together. And you can see that the results turned out pretty well. Another issue I had with it was some drift. It would drift clockwise slowly, and then also it would change roll as I tilted up and down. Not a big problem, because I contacted DJI and I performed the autotune function, which didn't do anything different than when it did previously when I did it. But then I found the calibration function, which is really quick. You just basically find it in the app and hit the button, and that seemed to solve all my problems, and now the drift is gone, which made me pretty happy. The other thing I was really curious about is how much attention would be drawn while using this. It is a new piece of tech, which always makes people look at it, but it's not big and bulky like some of the other Ronins, so I'm hoping people aren't going to ask for a permit when I'm filming with this. I will say I had a number of people come up and ask me questions about it. I mean, it looks really cool whenever you put it in that follow mode and it's just staring in one spot and you're moving around and doing some filming, which isn't unexpected. People thought it was cool. There were a couple people afraid to take some pictures of us with it because they didn't want to break it. Overall, I'm really impressed with the Ronin-S, and I'm glad I picked it up. Even though it doesn't have compatibility with the Canon 80D, and I hope they add some more of that later, I'm still going to be happy with it. I'm going to use it a ton with my filming. One more funny thing that happened, when we went to the next event, which was really close by, my keys fell right out of my pocket. I had a hole in my pocket the entire time, and somehow my keys didn't get lost in the City Museum, which is quite amazing because I'd never find them again. And our next activity while we were in St. Louis, of course, was the Cubs cards game at Busch Stadium, which was a ton of fun, and we had a blast. This has been Paul with the Ronin-S. Thank you for watching.